Well, hello, everybody. This is Caleb May. I'm so glad to be joined today by Mrs. Pam Hess and Mr. Jim Ediger. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
How you doing?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for joining me today. We'll just start off a little bit, just visiting and sharing about some of the time that you spent at Dover. So we'll start with you, Mrs. Hess. You want to give a little bit of a background, kind of where you're from, anything about your growing up and early adulthood, and then how you found yourself teaching at a town called Dover.
Well, I was born in Topeka and went to grade school there. I went to Most Proud of Mary Elementary School and Hayden High School and graduated a long time ago, 1966. And I don't know, as a kid, I just loved being outside. And it seems like our neighborhood had mostly boys. So I don't know, it seems like I was always outside with the boys doing something, playing ball or, probably pretending I was the teacher also and rounding up the neighborhood kids to play school. So
So you may have had to mother them a little bit from time to time, I suppose.
They didn't want to be mothered, that's for sure.
Now that's the school that Mr. Alan Zordell
Oh
teaches
yes,
at now,
I was so excited. Yes, we walked to school or rode our bikes, and those were the days of dresses. So I got pretty cold on my way to school. I wasn't about to wear slacks under my dress because that would be ugly. So that's about it. And just spent a lot of time growing up. It seems like watching my brother's baseball games or watching my dad umpire. And I loved Hayden basketball. That was our favorite thing to do, was go to Hayden basketball games as I got older. And that's about it on the childhood part.
Did you go to teacher school or?
Yeah, I went to Emporia State, and at that time it was Kansas State Teachers College, KSTC. That was in the late 60s, around the Vietnam War days. And let's see, what else? That was just a pretty ordinary life. Then I went to Connecticut my first year of teaching, and that was an eye-opener. That was in Hartford, Connecticut, and I missed my home and my family and my friends, so I came back to Kansas. And that's how I met my husband. I was teaching at Whiting, Kansas, and he was teaching in Onega, and we met after a high school football game, and so that was cool. And then, let's see, what did I do then? Then we moved to Topeka, and that's when I got a job with USD 330. So,
I wonder, in Connecticut, do they say that Hartford? Or do they have a different way of speaking up there?
Hartford. I guess it depends on who you're talking to. Yeah, some people have that high, I guess you'd say. The R disappears. But I've always had a love for the East Coast. My favorite place to travel is Maine. So, and Cliff and I were married about 50 years. And that's the sad part of my life. Because he died about a year ago.
So sorry to hear that.
But I loved being at Dover and Harveyville. Those were great places to teach. We got to really be teachers, I felt, in those early days, because you got to do fun things and you got to really get to know the kids and the parents. The later years were much more difficult because of all the testing we had to do. I hated that. And teachers were really held to the scores of the tests. And so I'm glad I got to retire in 2010.
Now, what was that like when you got hired on with USD 330? Did you see it advertised? Who interviewed you, and how did that experience go?
Mr. Anschutz, George Anschutz, interviewed me, and I saw it listed online at Emporia State, and I went to take the interview, and he said, well, what grade would you like to teach? There were like 8 different positions that year. And I drove around, and I knew there was just something about the Harveyville grade school and the look of the town and everything. So that's where I started. And so I first started in 5th grade, and Jim, I believe, was teaching, Mr. Ediger was teaching 3rd grade, and we became really good friends, and drove back and forth from Topeka to Harveyville, back and forth and back and forth. So that's how Mr. Anschutz just said, well, what grade do you want to teach, or what school do you want to teach in? So it was pretty easy.
And this was 1970?
About 73.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I was 2 years at Harveyville, and then the next 3 years were at Dover. And then I taught in Auburn, Washburn, and 501 for a while. And then I came back in around, 86. And again, I think Mr. Anschutz, I forget who was the superintendent then. It's when Pam Leptic was hired, actually. We were hired the same time. And he said, well, I've got a kindergarten position, and I've got junior high. And he said, have you ever coached or played sports? And I said, no. So I got the kindergarten job, and she got the junior high job. So that's how that all happened. But I love teaching kindergarten. I had 13 kindergarten classes, well, 26 because it was half day. And I drove back and forth from Harveyville to Dover for 13 years. And I loved that too, because I love driving the back roads in the country. I just loved the scenery and just being out in that area, driving back and forth. It didn't bother me at all, but it got tiresome after a while. And then I went back to 4th grade at Dover and stayed there until the new school was open.
So 86 must have been when Earl Nor Starbird retired from 1st grade, and Glenda Cox moved from kindergarten to 1st grade. And so then you came on at kindergarten.
Yes, I took Glenda Cox's position because Dottie Winland was still teaching 4th grade. And then when Dottie left, I went into 4th grade because I was tired of driving.
Now, had you taught at 4th grade in Dover previously?
Yeah, let's see. That was my first position. Yes. From 75, 76, 77. Harveyville first for a couple of years, and then Dover.
So you were 5th at Harveyville, then 4th at Dover. And
right.
then what grade did you teach at Auburn Washburn?
Auburn Washburn, I was 5th. I was 3rd. I've taught every grade but 1st grade, all the way up to 6th. When I taught at Lowman Hill, and I taught 4th, 5th, and 6th language arts. So I've done a lot of different grades, a lot of different schools, a lot of different principals.
All right, so I must have been either your first or second kindergarten group, somewhere in there.
40. No, were you in your 50s?
I'm 40.
You're 40.
I'll turn 41 this year.
Okay.
So that was about 35 years ago, probably.
I think Amy Campbell was one of my first classes.
That might have been when you were teaching 4th grade.
Yeah, in the 70s, yeah.
Okay. And so yeah, a class ahead of me, 1 or 2 years ahead of me, must have had Miss Cox twice for kindergarten and 1st grade.
Could have been, yes.
And then you probably, when you went back to 4th grade, would have had a lot of the same students you had 4 years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. So was there anything that you really loved teaching, or any experiences that kind of stood out? Maybe it was a special event or something that was going on, or anything along those lines?
Oh, I think I always loved teaching math because it was so exact, and enjoyed explaining the lesson before the kids, did their work. I guess that would be more fourth and fifth. Um, Kindergarten in those days, we could still play and we could still just enjoy. The kids could just still be enjoy being kids, and I really enjoyed that. I always had centers where the kids rotated around to different parts of the room. Although it was such a teeny tiny room at Dover, how we ever did that? It was like, okay, take 2 steps to the next center. But I was out in the trailer, I think, a few years as a kindergarten teacher, which
Yeah.
that was a little bit strange.
Yeah, my class was the last one that was in the annex. And
As a kindergarten,
that's right. And then the year after me, which would have been my brother Eli's class, would have been the first in what had been the library across the street or across the hall from first grade.
The special activity I mentioned at the reunion was when it was with Robbie Sage's class. We planted a time capsule. Must have been big in like 76 or something, because I think, Caleb, that's what you were thinking it was. But it was fun doing that because we had the TV station come out, and as I said at the reunion, the kids wanted to put in their math books. I said, well, we can't put them all in there, but I must not have been that great of a math teacher. I love math, maybe they didn't.
Well, maybe you were too good, and we're introducing some really tough concepts.
Maybe they didn't think they needed a book anymore since they knew it all. Who knows?
Did you ever dig up that time capsule?
I think we did.
Do
Because
you
I
remember
would.
when?
No, I don't. But I can just remember the pages of the math book were just had disintegrated. So maybe we waited 20 years or something. I don't know. And then the bad part about being at Dover is when the sewer backed up, and that was not a good situation. And then that building, if there was no heat, I think they told us that, well, there's only 2 people in the whole state that can fix the furnace. And so we had to wait for the guy to come. I think Emporia Hospital was the other place that had a furnace similar to ours. So Emporia Hospital took precedence if, there were problems or something. So I can remember teaching in very hot and very cold conditions. So.
Yeah, I remember in your kindergarten class playing with the wooden doll house, and there were all kinds of pretend food items and kind of a little table and chairs.
You didn't try to eat those, did you?
It could have been. I recall there was a girl named Chrissy in my class, and she loved to eat the paste. There were probably a lot of people who liked to eat paste because I don't know why they made it smell minty, but it definitely didn't taste as it smelled. And I do recall trying a couple of crayons just to see if they were different flavors.
They should have been, yeah.
Yeah. But coloring was a great fun time. I recall also the diploma, and we were all holding our diplomas up, and they were half as big as we were at the time. I still have that diploma. I should have brought it in here with us. A little part of a corner is torn, but all around the edges are nursery rhymes. And I don't remember if it was a requirement or not, but I do remember reciting those nursery rhymes all the way around.
We did that, those old-fashioned things, I call them now, that I'm not sure the kids do as many things like that. Now they're reading by the time they leave kindergarten.
I was visiting with one of the board members of the Dover Community Center, who had children, of course, that were through classes that you taught. And I mentioned that to her, and all of a sudden that sparked a memory for her. And she said she thinks that that's one of the reasons why the kids who came through your kindergarten classes were so good at remembering things, because memorizing those nursery rhymes right there at the very beginning was a pretty good foundation, to begin to organize things and categorize them in your mind, as it were.
Well, we had a big play where the kids, I don't know if it was with your class, where the kids dressed up and then we put it on for the parents. Tracy Keller made the background like a scene from, the back of a backdrop for a play. And I didn't do it with every class, but each kid or several children got to dress up and then recite the nursery rhyme. It was really fun and really a big deal for the kids to be in the little play.
I think I might remember that, and Pat Keller was in my class, so that would have certainly made sense if she was involved with doing a backdrop.
Mhm.
I do remember the walls in the cafeteria were still green, and we still had Mighty Mouse, and there was a huge clown that I thought was kind of scary that was on the back wall of the cafeteria. And then they kind of built out later a wooden kind of, I guess, storage room over top of that clown a few years later. And I thought that probably improved the look of the place. I don't know why clowns can be scary, but sometimes they are.
Well, one thing I'm remembering now is each letter of the alphabet, we did something different each week. But the two fun things was the time we had donuts with Dad, and all the dads got to come in and eat donuts. And then I think it was muffins with moms. And so not that every week had to do with food or bring somebody in, but the dads sure liked coming in to eat the donuts with their kindergartner.
I bet so. Well, let's jump over, and if you think of
Yes,
anything later, yeah.
Your turn, Mr. Ediger.
So,
Well,
Mr.
I'm
Jim
not
Ediger,
sure I
where are
have
you
as much
from,
to-
and how did you find yourself in Dover?
I'm not sure I have as much to share as Mrs. Hess did, but I'll give it a try. Where do you want me to start, Caleb?
Well, if I recall, you were from Oregon, and I remember you talking about Mount St. Helens, and you had some ash, I think, that you showed our class. So is that where you're originally from, is Oregon, or?
How in the world would you remember that? Actually, I was, born and raised in Oregon. I went to high school there, of course, elementary and high school. And I think I do kind of remember that little bottle of ash from Mount St. Helens. We probably took a trip back out there one time, and I brought that back. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and thought the kids would enjoy seeing that. But I was born and raised in Oregon. Graduated from high school in 1965. And in high school, I enjoyed playing sports. I played actually 2 years of football, 4 years of baseball, 1 year of junior varsity basketball. And I always like to mention that 1 year of junior varsity basketball, we had a perfect season. 0-22. We never won a game. So we went 0-22. So anyway, that was, I enjoyed doing that. I had two older brothers who also played sports and enjoyed watching them as well. But after high school, I worked for my dad, who was a cabinet builder. He had a shop right next to our house, so I worked for him for 1 year after I graduated. And after that, I went back east to Maryland to work for a couple of years. And that's where I met my wife. I should mention my first wife because I was divorced, but she was from Salina, Kansas. And so that's kind of how I ended up in Kansas. And after the 2 years in Maryland, I moved to Kansas, went to Kansas Wesleyan University in Salina, graduated with a degree in elementary education. And getting close to graduation, you start thinking, okay, what are you going to do now? Where are you going to go? And I kept checking with the placement office there, and I saw that there was an opening in USD 330 in Harveyville. So I applied. I applied several other places as well, but that seemed to be the one that had the highest salary, believe it or not, Mrs. Hess. Can you believe that?
Oh my goodness.
I know, and I'm sure that wasn't my deciding factor, although I think it did kind of play a part in, you know, in applying there. But I applied for a position there at Harveyville, and I remember one Saturday I drove to Harveyville. I met Mr. Anschutz. Their district office was on Main Street there in Eskridge, kind of a little hole in the wall. And we talked a little bit. We jumped in his car. We drove to Harveyville. He showed me around a little bit. And I think within days, I called him and said, I'll take the third grade position. And that was it. And I spent 4 years in Harveyville. And during that 4 years, we actually lived in Harveyville, bought a mobile home and moved it there to Harveyville. And for some reason, we decided to move that mobile home to Topeka. And so we lived in Topeka for a while, and well, more than a while, but in that mobile home. And I commuted back and forth to Harveyville. And then there was an opening at Dover. And so since Dover was closer to Topeka, where we lived, I applied for the transfer and got the fifth grade position there. And that was in, actually I started, let me back up a little bit. I started teaching in Harveyville in 1972, and that was a year before you, Pam, came to Dover. So I started teaching in Dover in 1976 and spent the next 26 years there. In that,
He was following me. He couldn't stand to be away from, we were right next door to each other.
maybe that was it. I don't know.
Oh, we were such good friends. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
we were really good friends.
We had some really, I mean, we could laugh and laugh and laugh about things. I don't know what about now, but there were a lot of good laughs.
Well, Pam, Caleb, I do have one remembrance of driving with Pam to school. And I don't know whether you remember this, but it was my turn to drive, and it was snowing that morning. And we went
I know what you're
some
talking
back,
about.
you know what I'm talking about.
But go ahead and finish it.
We drove some back road to get to, we were going to Harveyville, correct?
Probably.
We were still at Harveyville. Okay, so we were driving these back roads, and I was driving up this hill that was pretty snowy and icy, and I couldn't quite make it to the top. So I had to back down and get another run at it. Well, I didn't know whether there were any cars coming over the hill from the other directions. So when I made my attempt to get to the top, Pam got out of the car and stood at the top of the hill and watched for cars and told me, okay, you can come now. And so I made a run at it, and I went up the hill and made it to the top and picked her up and went on to Harveyville.
And then there's two other stories driving together. One had to do with an icy parking lot at Washburn Rural, because my husband taught at Washburn Rural. And Mr. Ediger was already in there in the parking lot waiting for me. And Cliff and I came into that parking lot, and we slid right into the side of his car and bashed it in. Do you remember that, Jim?
I do remember that. I do
And then
remember.
one time we saw an accident. Luckily, no one was hurt really bad. That was, we were coming out of Auburn going to Harveyville. I don't know if you remember that, but a car was
Yeah,
off to the side and we both stopped and helped the young girl and she was okay. But
yeah. I kind of vaguely remember that, but you know, those were, I guess we could call them good times.
we can still remember them. That's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, Caleb, I spent the next 26 years there at Dover and retired in 2002. And that last year, for some reason or another, the junior high, I think, had moved over to, didn't they go to Harveyville the last
I think
for a
so.
couple of years? The junior
Yeah.
high was at Harveyville.
Mhm.
I
Well, for
think the
some
junior high was
reason,
at Harveyville, and Dover became Mission Valley East, and Eskridge became Mission Valley West Elementary, I think, something like
something
that.
like that, yeah. But that was before they completed the junior high and elementary at Mission Valley, I think. But anyway, that last year, they moved my fifth grade over to that old junior high building. And I'm not sure why they did that. I don't remember the reason, but I don't know why they didn't leave me where I was, but they had me move over to
Isn't
the
that
junior
when
high
they
building.
changed the lot? They took the library out of the mobile and put the library in your room,
That could be. That could have been.
and they got rid of that mobile.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what I think.
yeah. You could be right on that. I didn't quite remember that, but that kind of comes back now. But anyway, that last year I was over in the junior high building with my fifth grade.
Who
But
else was over there? Music class.
well, actually, they had fifth and sixth grade over there,
Okay.
and I don't remember that teacher's name. She was right across the hall.
Because before they were part of the departmentalized sixth grade. They weren't self-contained.
Right. Yeah. But that last year they were self-contained.
Yeah.
So was that
So
maybe, I'm trying to think of who was around at that time.
I don't remember it.
I don't remember her name. I don't think she was there but a year or two, maybe.
And was it Converse? Maybe.
No,
Oh, Diana Converse, maybe?
that's not who it was.
Okay.
She lived
Okay,
in Eskridge. She
that'll
lived
be
in Eskridge.
a trivia question for you, Caleb, on your website,
There we
on our
go.
little group. See who can come up with that.
That's for sure. I do remember one thing, and I would be remiss if I didn't touch on a little bit the cosmosphere. I love so much in your fifth grade class, Mr. Ediger. You brought in the reflecting telescope that you had built, and you had us, I believe, bring in telescopes that we had. I had a very simple, small one. And we learned a little bit about the stars, and we sold candles and holiday cards and things of this nature, and
Yeah.
raised some funds to go to the Cosmosphere in Hutchinson. And I think I still have my ticket stub somewhere from going to the Cosmosphere. And in preparation for that, we had done micro money. And very
Yeah.
fond memories of micro money and the little auctions that we would have. I think it was on Friday or something, and we would get candy bars and pop cans and things like that. And so a lot of really great things there.
You know, Caleb, you're stealing my thunder because I was going to bring that stuff up as remembering things. Yeah, those we did have those fundraisers to raise money to go to the Cosmosphere, and yeah, candles and I think one year we sold little precious moments statues, and we always raised enough money to pay for the kids' tickets to the Cosmosphere, and they had enough left over that we always stopped at the McDonald's on the way. They'd had enough money to spend at McDonald's. So I think just about every year, almost every year, maybe, I drove the bus. And I tell you, I don't know, I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I did that, but I did. And I was a glutton for punishment, I guess. But
Because that's a long way to Hutchinson.
it is a long way. It's
Oh,
probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours maybe.
and then the parents picked the kids up after dismissal. They had to come to the school in their cars. You didn't get there back in time.
Oh, no, we didn't
Yeah,
get back
you had extra.
till 7 or 8 in the evening.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a fun trip, but everybody knew we were going to get back late. So, yeah, those were fun times. I think the kids really enjoyed it. In fact, I had one student who enjoyed it so much, I think he applied, what was it called, for astronauts training camp or something, that he went back and
Who was
spent.
that? Do you remember?
Pardon me?
Who was that person? Do you remember?
I think, I could be wrong, but I think it was Clipper Goodrich.
Mhm,
I think that's who it was.
mhm.
And I actually saw him at the reunion, and I was going to ask him
Oh,
about
he was
that, but
at the reunion? Oh, my gosh.
yeah.
Oh,
But I didn't get a chance to ask him about that, if he remembered that. But
but you did
I
talk
think
to
he
him.
was the one.
Did you talk to him?
Very, very briefly. Very briefly.
That's
But,
my regret with the reunion. I was telling Caleb, it's not that I would have wanted to spend 12 hours there, but it's just that there just wasn't enough time to touch, to do everything I wanted
Yeah,
to do. I mean,
yeah.
when you're someplace 28, 29 years, and I can't remember whether it's 28 or 29 now, I think it's actually 29. I mean, like I said in the little speech, you feel like you knew everybody in the room, and it's like, it was almost too much. I could not sleep that night. It was just too much for my brain.
Now, Mrs. Hess, what were you saying about the reunion? That's you didn't get a chance to see everybody. I think we'd mentioned that Clipper Goodrich was there somewhere for a while.
I don't know. I would have liked to have had a conversation with more people, and didn't even hardly get to say goodbye to some people like Mrs. Fredrickson. And so it was overwhelming for me. I don't know, Jim, was it overwhelming for you, or is I'm just an emotional woman or whatever?
It was pretty overwhelming. When I walked in the front doors, I didn't know what to expect, but as soon as I walked in, I kind of immediately, started chatting with some former teachers there, right there in the hallway in front of the offices, and then finally made my way into the auditorium there. And I think I'm like you, Pam. It was overwhelming, and there were so many people and former students that I would have liked to chat with. And later, after I got home, I thought, I wished I would have talked to this person. I wish I would have talked to that person. But it's hard to get around to everybody.
It really is. I had kind of in my mind, I didn't realize, first of all, how large it was going to become when I started shaking the trees and all the fruit seemed to have fallen. But I did have in my mind that the teachers would all be sitting kind of in front of the stage. And then as everybody else came through, they could kind of walk by almost like a reception line and visit. And that probably would have been a better scenario. But even still, I mean, just with the amount of folks, and I know all the teachers wanted to see their rooms too. So it was for this first one, very unstructured because we had never done it before. So we will learn. And I think that perhaps we will begin to do this maybe as an annual thing. And so hopefully we'll get better with it over time.
Well, Caleb, in my mind, it was kind of nice to mingle just to kind of walk around and, and chat with people. And then, some students came up to me and, I know the name, but I can't put the face, with it. I'm glad you have the name tag. So that was good because, I would have never remembered their names, even though I could, some I didn't recognize, some I did. So it was interesting. And, Pam, you asked what I thought. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. It was nice, but like you, I wished I had a chance. I didn't tell Mrs. Fredrickson goodbye. I didn't, even Dottie Wendland, there's just so much you'd like to say and talk about, but it's just hard to get around to everybody.
I was hesitant to go. I knew I wanted to go, but it's like any reunion. It's like when you walk in, you're thinking, oh my gosh, how's this going to go? But I'm so glad I went, and it was wonderful. And Caleb, you just did such a good job. You just are amazing. Your brain was just working in all different directions. And
probably in overtime.
I really thank you for organizing it. You did a wonderful job.
And I second that, Caleb. You did a great job getting this all together.
Yeah. And Jim, I'm so glad you acknowledged him in the large group, because that is so true that we needed to thank you, Caleb. So thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming. I mean, it's very symbiotic. I mean, you all were very much a huge part of our formative years, and I don't think I realized as much when I started putting this together, but I should have, because in visiting with Mrs. Fredrickson initially, when she wanted to have some kind of a gathering, and it sort of grew legs from there, it really is the case that all of us kids, I'll say kids with air quotes here because we're not quite kids anymore, but we really touched all of your lives as well. And so I think that it's a chapter of all of our lives, and I don't know what it is that's so special about Dover. Maybe it's not really Dover. Maybe it's just every little town. And when the guy from WWW was there and kind of asked me some questions, that was kind of what I came back to, is that I think that part of what perhaps we've lost as a culture, maybe we've got a shot at regaining, which is reconnecting with those small communities and really being a part of each other's lives. I think maybe in some ways we've become too sterilized, to shut off from each other. And there are very important reasons why this happened, crazy people that have done crazy things and stuff like that. But an unintended side effect is that folks who really do care about each other, that perhaps haven't seen each other for years, it's kind of tricky to get back in touch sometimes. And but I'm just so glad that you guys all came, and you really did make it an incredible day. And we did get a group started, and so the other two officers and I are going to meet sometime. We were hoping this Wednesday, but it looks like next week might be more the case, and hammer this out a little bit. But I would love to have, and of course I'm just talking out loud here, but you mentioned not having enough time with Mrs. Fredrickson, for example. I think we've got about 3 former teachers who have filled out the information sheet, and I hope that a lot more
I'm not one of them yet.
Because what I would love to do is create sort of special interest groups almost as well. And among those teachers, you all who taught together, if you wanted to do something separately, and if I could help facilitate communication, I would be glad to, for perhaps on an anniversary of when Mrs. Fredrickson started working at Dover, or perhaps for a birthday, or something that might work. And I've got her niece's contact information and her son's contact information as well. Perhaps a surprise birthday get together or something like that, might be something that would be good. But Well, here I'm talking too much, and it's about you guys. Do you have any other final thoughts kind of to share or any
Oh,
memories?
only the other thing I'm just remembering, because this is kind of unheard of now, but uh, during was it American Education Week or National Education Week? I think it was in November. Mr. Lang used to always have us all go to church. And I thought that was,
Mm,
for me, it was a little bit strange being a public school teacher and going to church at the Dover Federated Church. But you didn't say no. I mean, you were there. I mean, it was like, it was just expected of you, and it was wonderful. I mean, once we all got there and it was fine, it was just something that didn't quite, for me, didn't quite go together, because I believe in public school education, kind of the separation. But when we were at Dover and Mr. Lang was in charge, you went.
mhm.
And it was wonderful. I mean, and I think he had us all stand up or something, I don't know, but it was nice.
I kind of forgot about that, Pam, but you're right. I do, now that you mention it, I do recall those things. And, there are so many memories that we could recall, but, hey, we only have 40 more minutes, don't we?
I know, and I have something else I have to, I don't want to have another night where I can't sleep.
Oh, shoot. See
Well,
what
you
you're doing
mentioned
to
that.
us, Caleb?
Well, see, I now that you mention that and talking to Mrs. Lee, her video, if you've seen the videos that are on Facebook, was the last one that was done the day of the reunion. And so she had, kind of like you two have had, this experience of how that occurred. And I'm not sure if this ended up on her film or if she mentioned it before, but this thing about, um, there are things in your mind that you forget are in there and you don't even think you have access to anymore. But all of a sudden, something about seeing faces, hearing voices,
Mhm,
interacting with
mhm.
people, and everything, it brings back the ability to access those things in your mind. And I think, in terms of, especially as we all age and so forth, I
Hey,
think,
speak for yourself.
well, I am here, I guess I'm middle-aged now, something like that. But if you don't use it, you lose it. And so I think, strengthening those muscles, as it were, is a good thing. And so it has made me remember to talk more to my grandmother, who's 92 and a half and still living on the farm, and things of this nature, because you need that connection, and you need to continue to revisit these things in your mind, or you become less able to retain new things, I think, if you're
Yeah.
not strengthening the older things. So
Yeah.
uh,
Well, Caleb, just hearing you talk, you mentioned some things when you were in the fifth grade, the micro money. That was, I think that was a lot of fun. And, and I think if I remember right, Mr. Lang would come in at the end of each semester and have that auction.
I
I'm
remember
not
that.
sure it was, I'm not sure it was on a weekly basis, but he was
Mhm.
an auctioneer.
Mhm.
And he and I would put together these prizes and these things, and kids, and we would auction them off, and kids would bid on those things. And you're right, they were like candy bars, cans of pop, and various things like that. And to me, that was a real learning experience. And it's just something that another thing that Mr. Lang did for our school and for the kids. And not to mention the square dance, um, that he did. He did the whole thing. I mean, he did
And then
a lot.
they would have big dinners for us at his house. You remember
Yes,
that? I mean, it was
Chris,
like a whole meal. I mean, I
Christmas
know,
parties.
I know.
Yeah, and I remember, on parent teacher conference, we had a dinner break. We would always go into Topeka, I think, and eat at some restaurant or something for our dinner break. Just something that we would do together as teachers, to build that relationship. And it was wonderful, really. It was really great.
And
I'm
Mr.
glad I,
Lang, he retired as principal after my first grade or after my kindergarten class. So that I mentioned the picture where I'm holding the diploma that's about half the size that I was. Mr. Lang went around and shook every one of our little hands and gave us that diploma. And
yes.
so even though he retired, he then went to coaching and he still did the square dance
Hmm.
every year. I think it was November, usually when he did that. November must have been a pretty busy month because,
Yeah,
Well, I
because,
think
you know,
that was Education Week,
yeah,
National Education Week,
that's right.
that he would do that. That was a fun night. I'm not one for dancing a whole lot, but that was fun.
and I love the point then when he said, now you little boys and girls go out there and get your moms and dads and bring them out and we'll dance. And so here we were, the kids leading around mom and leading around dad, and they had no clue what was going on.
Do you remember the practices though? They did not go so well.
Well, it was like herding
Oh my
cats,
gosh.
definitely.
He
And I
was,
think,
it was stressful for the
Yeah.
teachers and Mr. Lang.
and
But we sure didn't show it when the night of the square dance. We were just all doing our perfect little things. Oh, that's funny.
yeah, he
But the night of
matched
the
up,
square dance was a lot of fun.
absolutely. He matched up, I think it was junior high grades with the lower grades.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that was very helpful as well, because then you had kids who in most cases had been through it several years that were then helping
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But I know as a little bitty guy, that's a little bit embarrassing, to have a big lady, that is helping you, who's a seventh grader or an eighth grader or something. So,
Oh, it'd be scary.
and of course, here you're swinging that lady as pretty as you can, and it's a little hard to swing somebody that's twice your height, but
Yeah.
yeah, I called a square dance in the cafeteria of the grade school. Gosh, it's probably 15 years ago or so. That's another thing I'd love to do sometime again if anybody would be interested in doing it. And some of these things can be much smaller gatherings, it doesn't have to be every one that's 108 people or whatever. I think that's about what we had at the reunion.
Caleb, did that include, I know there were some spouses there of teachers. Did that include the spouses, or was that just former teachers and students, former students?
I don't know how many didn't sign the book, but I know that some people told me that they'd sneaked in the back door. So
Oh,
it's a little bit hard to get an exact bead, but I think somewhere
yeah.
there, just a little bit over 100.
Yeah.
At one point, I thought that there might have been close to 150 by the people who had pre-registered if they all brought significant others, but I think there were quite a few folks who didn't bring anybody.
Mhm.
There were quite
Yeah.
a few who came just by themselves. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
all
Well,
righty. Well, thanks again, you guys, for coming. Any last thoughts?
well, I'll tell you, Caleb, Dover, like I said before, we had many wonderful memories there, and probably wouldn't trade it for anything. There's just something about a small community, that and the relationship you develop with the parents and other people you work with, there's nothing like it. And I've always said that we had wonderful support from the community and from the parents of our kids. If one of the kids need to be disciplined, the parent was right there behind us. And it was kind of like whatever happens at school happens at home. You'll get it at home, some type of thing. But it was there's just something about the small communities, and especially Dover, that
And for me, it was just really fun seeing my students now as adults. I
yeah,
love the conversations I got to have with them.
yeah,
The ones that
Yeah.
I do, that I did get to have just because of the time factor, but it was just,
yeah,
it'll be memorable. Those students that I talked with that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Well, thanks again, you guys. And I'm sure we won't be strangers at this point. Hopefully this becomes kind of an annual thing. And it is always so good, I think, to remember the past, things that were good, and maybe sometimes the things that weren't so good as well. And we can learn from them and hopefully go forward with that. So,
Oh, I didn't get a chance to mention the things that were not so good.
oh,
I mentioned the sewer and the furnace, so
well,
that's not a good way to end. No.
I won't go into anything in specifics, but I know, Mr. Ediger, one thing that was probably part of the not so good, and we can visit more about that later. But there was someone who spoke to me the day of the reunion who really regretted not visiting with you the day of the reunion, who wanted to apologize about something. And so anyway, we'll leave it at that. But again, thank you guys so much for being here today, and we will see you again next time. Bye, everybody.
All right. Thank you again, Caleb.
Thank you.
You take care.
You too.